want to say thank you all for joining. Thank you all for coming on and being a part of this. This is going to be a fun night of learning something new, and we are excited. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rob Goff. I'm the Executive Director for Washington State Funeral Directors Association. I'm the host of the Member Talks by Washington State Funeral Directors Association, which is a podcast and a YouTube page. And in case you saw, or if you didn't see the emails that we sent out previously, we are recording tonight's meeting, and this will come out next week on our YouTube and on our podcast page. So we're excited to have you on here and talk with you. Want to say thank you to our sponsor. We have a sponsor for tonight's meeting. In case you wonder who that might be, they're right behind me. They're United Heritage Life Insurance. We want to thank them for coming on and being a part of them. I want to tell you a little bit about United Heritage. They are headquartered in Idaho. They've been there since 1934. United Heritage does offer a unique and competitive pre-need insurance product for Washington. They're focused on policy growth, competitive commissions, and excellent customer service. United Heritage is here to help you and your funeral homes, and we'd love for you to contact Sean Hudson at United Heritage if you want to know more. He's reachable 208-866-8110. And if you're lucky, I think he's even on the call tonight somewhere in this group of faces that I'm looking at. So Sean's on here with us, and we want to thank United Heritage for coming on. Tonight, we're going to have 3 different speakers coming to us. They will each get 10 minutes to present. They're going at the conclusion of their presentation. Sorry, I'm trying to get people in as well. At the conclusion of tonight's presentation, we're going to move into a question and answer period. The questions that we'll be asking have been previously sent to us and we'll be asking those of our speakers randomly. We do have the chat window open, and you'll be able to write additional questions in the chat window as well. If we have enough time at the end of the meeting, we will be asking from that chat window question. But again, we want to respect the time that the speakers have for us, and so we would ask that we don't have any open or live question and answer period. So let's give you a little background. Natural organic reduction, we call it NOR for short. It first hit the public's radar during the 2019 legislative session. Senate Bill 5001, as it was known, included many topics concerning human remains, as well as changes including alkaline hydrolysis. Senate Bill 5001 raced through the House and Senate and was passed by very high percentages of votes in both legislative groups. In May of that year, the Washington State legislation passed a bill which was signed into law by Governor Inslee on May 21st, 2019. The legislation did give about a year's growth period or time where where the Department of Licensing could create some rules governing NOR, and NOR became effective in a legal form of human disposition in Washington starting on May 1st of 2020. Since that time, 3 people have applied and received natural organic reduction licenses. They're here with us today. For the first time ever, to my knowledge, we have Katrina Spade from Recompose, Walt Patrick of the Herland Forest, and Micah Truman from Return Home, all on the same webinar, and all going to be talking with us this evening. So let's go ahead and get started. I would first like to introduce our very first speaker, Katrina Spade. Katrina is the founder and CEO of Recompose. She's been an entrepreneur and designer since 2002. She has over 15 years experience in project management, finance, and architecture with a focus on human-centered ecological solutions. While earning her master's of architecture, Katrina invented a system to transform the dead into soil, which is now patent pending. In 2017, she founded Recompose, a funeral home focused on offering the process known as natural organic reduction or human composting. Katrina partnered with her allies across the industry to legalize to legalize two new dispositions in Washington State: alkaline hydrolysis and natural organic reduction. In 2020, she and the Recompose team were the first full-service funeral home to offer natural organic reduction. So I would like to introduce to all of you Miss Katrina Spade. Katrina? I think you're still on mute. Oh, do I got to do it here? Okay.
Yeah, you got to do it.
There it is. Now we got you.
Yep. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see a lot of these faces I've seen before. I've met you before or seen you on a familiar webinar just like this. Thanks. So, Rob, I take it I should go into my 10 minutes right now.
Go ahead and start. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to share my screen so you can look. I mean, I know we all like to look at each other, but it might be fun to see some pictures as well. All right. Can you all see this slide?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, yes, thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I started this work, now it's weird to think, but almost a decade ago, when I just became curious for my own personal self and reasons, and friends and family, what were all the options for bodies when we die. And I kind of realized right away I didn't really want to be cremated, and I was pretty sure I didn't want to be buried. So I started investigating, well, what are the other ways we can care for a body here in the US? And you all know really well that there's not a whole other options here. And then I was, looking into all the ways we can break down a body, and a friend of mine called me and told me about a form of composting called livestock mortality composting, which is when farmers all over the US, break down an animal carcass using the principles of composting. It's something that farmers have been doing for decades now, and yet had never been applied to the human form. And so it was immediately obvious to me that if you can compost a cow, you can probably compost a human being. And the question became, well, first, would anyone really want that besides me and my friends and family? And the other question was, top of mind for me, was how to make that a meaningful, beautiful, human appropriate process. So along the way, the questions have always been how to make this process work from a technical and scientific side, and how to make it something that resonates for the human experience. What you see in front of you is our first facility. We're in Kent, Washington. This is our 10-vessel array. So Recompose uses a vessel system. That means that we put one body into one, for lack of a better word, large container, and fill that container with plant material. We use alfalfa, straw, and wood chips. And over time, the microbial activity breaks down that plant material and that body, creating a nutrient-rich soil. So I designed this vessel system with many brilliant people. And we decided to go vertical, in part because we're an urban-focused company. We think this is a great process, a great disposition process for urban centers, when people want to reconnect with nature, but natural burial isn't really an option because it's not right in the city most of the time. So we went vertical for that reason. We wanted to have a small footprint, and you can see that the vessels, well, they probably make you think of a beehive, which kind of gets people into the frame of reference of nature, and has been something that people really enjoy. This is our cradle right here, where we place a body and that plant material, and then load the body into the vessel, where it remains for approximately a month. During that time, temperatures reach 131 upwards to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That temperature, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's created entirely by the microbial activity. We don't inoculate anything. Those microbes are on us right now as we speak. They're on the wood chips, they're in the air, they're on the body itself, and they start breaking the body down right away. Our vessel, you can kind of get a sense, is cylindrical in there, and it does rotate. So we actually mix the material several times during that month-long span by slowly rotating that vessel. And then one thing to note in terms of those temperatures is they're critical for destroying harmful pathogens. And the temperatures are what the Department of Licensing needs as part of the record keeping for any operator to see that we've hit temperatures of 131 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 consecutive days, at least once. And then after this approximate 1 month period, we unload that soil, which at this point looks like the topsoil or compost you would buy at a nursery. And we screen and sort for non-organics. And we then have a curing period that's another several weeks. So families aren't getting anything back for about 6 to 8 weeks. And we also break down any large bone fragments that remain so that at the end of the process, any bone fragments are usually about 1/8 of an inch if they exist at all at that point. Ooh, I'm talking too much. Let me check my time here. Okay. This is another shot of that vessel. You get a sense of the bed of plant material that we lay and that we lay the body onto. We also have what we call a laying in ceremony. And that's when our services manager walks a family virtually at this time through a ceremony that includes talking about the return to nature, talking about the natural cycles, why we're placing the body in the vessel, and what it means to have molecules rearranged and soil created out of our human body. It's quite beautiful. And I could talk at length about what the pandemic has done for us in terms of crafting those ceremonies and what it's meant for us to do virtual ceremonies. I don't know about all of you, but we've found that they can be really beautiful and they can work out pretty well. I mean, it's not the same as being in person, but it's been pretty lovely to be able to offer this during the pandemic. And then each body that goes through the Recompose process is creating about a cubic yard of soil that fills a pickup truck. So it's not just an urn size. And so we, from the beginning, have found that actually about half of our families do want that cubic yard back. And then about half of our families would just as soon have a small amount, which we provide in a 64-ounce container that we've designed specially for the soil. And the rest of it gets donated to this conservation partnership we have with this beautiful land you see here, 700 acres in southern Washington. It's land that needs to be regenerated. And so folks can donate the cubic yard or most of it to this land to help regenerate the forest. And then they can go and visit this place. We don't put soil on an individual tree. We don't track beyond the donation to the forest, because actually for our clients, it really is about the forest. It's about returning to the entire cycle rather than most of the time about an individual tree. But I actually just today we went and did a drop of soil of several clients, Recompose clients, and it's just beautiful to be in this gorgeous place and know that these folks, like, their nutrients are actually being productive, going back to do the hard work of regenerating that place. We opened Recompose, our first facility, in December of 2020. We talk about it as being maybe the only good thing that happened to me in 2020, I think, was opening up our Recompose facility. And we have plans to open many more. We know that we're not meeting demand right now. Folks are really excited about this idea. They find solace, I think, in the transformation. And we're building a great team and a great replicable process. So I think actually I'll stop there. I bet I've hit 10 minutes, but I look forward to answering questions on the other end.
Well, thank you, Katrina. You had about a minute to go left. So you were right there.
Close enough.
Yep. Thank you. Our next presenter we're going to talk with tonight is Walt Patrick. Introduce you to Walt. Walt, for more than 30 years, Walt Patrick has served as the Director of Research and Development for the Windward Education and Research Center. It is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to demonstrating sustainable village-scale technology. In service of that work, Walt has had extensive experience transforming large mammals, such as sheep and goats, into productive soil using woody biomass gathered from the center's permaculture forest. The emergence of natural organic reduction for humans is a natural outgrowth of that work. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Walt Patrick from the Herland Forest. And Walt, you may have to unmute, I think.
I think I'm there.
All right.
Okay. Hi. What I wanted to do here, Katrina's done a good job of talking about the situation and what's all involved. I thought I would help and show you exactly how we do what our work is, and maybe answer some curiosity there. We use the term investment to refer to putting the body into the vessel. In this case, we call it a cradle, because it's basically an insulated coffin that rolls back and forth on a rack that allows the mixing to happen. And so thought I'd show you it. We use the term investment in the sense of lost wax casting, where you take old jewelry and cast it into a new form. We kind of feel that's what we're doing. We're taking a worn out body and casting it into a new form to give new life to it. So a little bit of sentimental issues there about calling it an investment. So I'd like to show you one. So Rob, if you'd pull up some of those slides.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm doing it here. It worked.
Okay. So here, this is back in December of last year, where we were getting ready to start with our first cradle rack combination. You can see the cradle in the back. It has these huge 3-foot around diameter spools on it, and it rolls back and forth. You'll get to see some of that. So next. So here's a decedent arriving at the rack. Next. Next. Now, rather than show you anything about the actual decedent in there, I went ahead and climbed into the cradle to give some idea of the scale, etc. So what we've got in the bottom is 100 gallons of wood chips, and then the decedent is laid out on top of that. What you're seeing there is the probe that we use to monitor the internal temperature of the cradle. Next. So here we are bringing the decedent out. Next. So because the cradle rotates, it's a simple matter to rotate it over to the side to make transferring the decedent to the cradle easily. Next. One of the things different about our situation is that we are a cemetery. We are licensed as a cemetery, not as a funeral establishment. So when it comes to actually laying out the decedent in there, we have to partner with a licensed funeral director or embalmer. And this person here is Elizabeth Fourier of Cornerstone out of Boring. And she's been a real assistance for us in getting started. And here she's helping us get the decedent laid into the cradle. Next. So here we're in the process of removing the plastic from the decedent and the various other clothing on the decedent. Next. So Elizabeth is just checking it out as I'm going to get more wood chips. Next. So we just go ahead and put in another 100 gallons of wood chips. So we're basically balancing one decedent, in this case, someone about 130 pounds, with 200 gallons of wood chips. Next. Next. It actually takes a little bit of time to get them all in. Next. And other people like to get involved. This is Elizabeth actually loading in a bucket of chips. Next. Okay, now going ahead and getting the wood chips leveled around, getting ready to finish the investment. Next. So they'll give you an idea of what the cradle looks like with the wood chips, the decedent, and the wood chips, leaving space in the top for the actual rotation. Next. Next. So here we are putting the lid on top of the cradle. The two black things are inspection ports that allow us to monitor the progress interior, both for relative humidity, temperature, we have a camera that goes in and checks on things. So next, getting ready to actually seal the containment. Next. And there we are. It's put back together. So next. Now what I'm pointing to here is one of our supplemental heating. Again, we're doing this outside. We're not in a heated warehouse. We're in a forest. And so heading into winter, this was done in December. And so how do we maintain supplemental heating? Well, the thing to the right is a heating element. So there's a 50-foot coil of heat tape inside the vessel to have a steady increase of temperature to help counteract the loss of heat by being outside in the environment. Below my hand is a entry point for us to put in either air or a oxygen enriched mix that then is added to the container to help keep the aerobic nature of the decomposition happening. Next. Okay, so that's it together. Just you can see the the way the cradle is emptied, it rolls forward and rolls up this little ramp onto these rollers. And that allows us to turn it in place as we remove the material from the cradle and strain it again to go after any bones, or we're primarily looking for, in this case, any heavy metal components that we want to remove. Next. Okay, here's a very short little clip of showing this lady weighs about 120 pounds. This is a little video clip, but it's not running yet. There we go.
Okay. Play with it.
Yeah. So she's practicing and getting a feel for, now this cradle weighs a ton. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's so balanced and so structured that she's able to move it by hand.
Get out of there.
She's getting a feel for it because she's got to steer it. Because if you pull too much on one side, it gets sideways on the cradle. And so you have to be careful to pull equally on the two handles.
You hear the stuff tumbling inside?
So you can see it's easily done. Okay. That's all the pictures there. All righty. So we are, as I said, a cemetery, and we come at that from the standpoint of a cemetery. So we are working with funeral directors who decide that their clients want this situation. And so that's part of the involvement. We are not able, because we're not a funeral establishment, we're not able to do pre-need work. So that's part of the situation. So that's how we're different. Now, many of the people who come to us decide that they want to go into the forest. And so we have a 20-acre cemetery. We're in the process of adding another 25 acres to the cemetery. And so when somebody comes to us, they go in and they are interred, and we basically plant a tree on top of it. That's what got us into this, because we were using large mammals and wood chips to create soil to provide a positive environment for the trees that we plant in our forest, as we go in for diversity and productivity for the animals and the birds and the bees and so on. And so if somebody wants to go directly back to the forest, we can do that. If they want to be buried on their own land, I mean, we got into this because I came up to this forest 35 years ago, and I knew it was my forever home. And so I wanted to be buried there. So how do we make that happen? In Washington, you have to be buried in a licensed cemetery. So we went ahead and started the process back in 2010 to become a licensed cemetery. And we've been interring people since 2016. And so this is just kind of a natural outgrowth of our doing natural organic reduction in the ground in situ. We have a lot of clay in our soil, so we dig our graves by hand. They're very tightly dimensioned, and put the 200 gallons of wood chips in with the body. And we have special air introductions and water introductions. And so we're really focused on making sure that a tree for that person in memorial is effective and successful. because, you know, if somebody is trying to deal with their grief at the loss of someone, to then have the tree die would be just really, really sad. So we put a lot of effort into making sure this works. So that's pretty much what we're doing.
Well, thank you, Walt. I'd like to introduce you to our next presenter and our last presenter before we get into a question and answer period. Micah Truman is joining us from Return Home. Micah is the founder and CEO of Return Home. He spent the last several years leading the scientists and engineers behind Return Home's proprietary. We just put the screen on there.
Oh, sorry, here.
That's all right. Returning Home, engineers behind Return Home's proprietary terramation process. Micah created Return Home to fulfill a lifelong dream to create a successful business that leaves the world a better place. Micah was based in China for 20 years, where he started one of China's first online advertising agencies and later founded AsiaWise Capital Partners, a cross-border investment firm. Micah has been featured in the Seattle Times, the New York Times, Inc. magazine, on National Public Radio. He lives in Seattle with his wife and 2 children. I'd like to present our final presenter of the night, Mr. Micah Truman from Return Home.
Thank you, Rob. Going to get this on slideshow. Have we got it clear in front of you all? Okay.
Yep, we can see it.
Thank you. So thanks for the introduction, Rob. As he said, I'm Micah Truman. I am the CEO of Return Home, the third company in this space. So we're really excited to be here tonight for the first time all together. Before we get into the talk of what we are and how we do it, I want to talk a little bit about the words we use. Natural organic reduction and human composting. Natural organic reduction, while legal, is a little clinical, and human composting is kind of creepy. And we at Return Home use the word terramation. And why do we do that? Terra, the earth, our connection to the earth. We want to use the same word in this, just like we use with cremation. We don't call it human incineration, and we don't call burial underground interment. So going forward, and in this presentation, and going forward, in the future, this is the word that we will use for the process. Return Home. We're a terramation provider. We transform human remains into soil, just like Walt's company does and Katrina's does. We're the third entry, and we are the last one coming in. Before I get into my talk with you guys, I want to talk a little bit about the funeral industry and my original meeting with you guys. About 1.5 years ago, I went to DEF CON. You guys really own it. And off I went and sat with you. And on the last night of the conference, there was a party and there was music and everyone was hanging out and had a couple beers. And I was sitting on the stairs and this young funeral director was sitting next to me. And she asked me what I was doing, and it was early days. I didn't really know, but I had some ideas and I explained it to her. And she looks at me and she goes, "We're not crazy about you guys. We don't like you much. And we don't like what you're doing." And I was like, "Well, how come? It's pretty good. I think this should work." And she went, "Well, the legislature has put forward these rules and they're going to approve them. It looks like it's going to go. There are no papers. We've seen nothing. We don't understand your process. We read articles. We don't know if this is actually going to work, and you are an entrepreneur. And if you don't pull this off, maybe you're going to make a dog walking app and leave. And who's going to hold the bag? The funeral industry is going to hold the bag." And I was sort of sitting there going, that makes sense to me. I get that. And so we turned around and we focused really hard on our science. And our science was very much focused, honestly, on pigs. We have done dozens and dozens of pigs in pursuing both the science and the technology and the machinery to get it done. And I can assure you that we are ready to do this and that we are dialed and can get this done in a way that gives you guys confidence. Getting into the process. Really, I'm going to go quickly because it's not much different than Walt's or Katrina's. The science is the science. We place a body in a vessel. We too have vessels. It's surrounded by bulking agent, straw, sawdust, alfalfa, much like Walt and Katrina do. It's very important you guys understand, however, what we do and why we do it. Our process is predicated on not altering a body. By that we mean we don't cut it, we don't grind it, and we don't separate it. And we don't do that until the body is completely gone. And that was the instructions given to our scientists from the get-go. Just like Katrina was saying, the body stays in the vessel for 30 days. I'm blown away by what happens. As you heard, north of 140 degrees, the body truly transforms into soil, and it does. After 1 month, we then transfer the soil from a vessel into a container, into a bin, and let it sit for 1 more month. So for a total of 2 months. And when we're done, the soil is then delivered to the family. So there's our general process. Let's address the elephant in the room, because I'm getting it a lot. I talk to the funeral industry a great deal. We talk to the public. What happens to bones and teeth? A lot of people feel that somehow the bones and teeth are disappearing, that the terramation process does this. Our science does not replicate that. Bones and teeth are absolutely there, and they are there in substantial form. After 30 days, when we actually separate out soil, we reduce those bones. We remove inorganics, as was described earlier, and we reduce that bone. We reduce it just like you guys reduce bone in a cremation process after in a cremulator. We have our own machinery for doing that. We then take that reduced bone, put it into the soil, and let it sit for 1 more month. And at that point, the bone is largely gone. It is gone. To be honest, I think our soil doesn't have any in it, and we pass the soil then to the family. We're now going to go into our facility, its size, what it can do, how we can work with you. But I think it's a little better that our services director, Bree Smith, address you guys. So it's my privilege to introduce you all to Bree Smith, our services director. Bree?
Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna Smith. Thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor to be here. I am Return Home Services Director, and I've been in the funeral industry now for almost a decade and serving the families of the greater Seattle area for the last 7 years. So with Return Home, I applied for the job and was just very interested because I walked through the facility and I saw the process and I saw the end result, and truly natural organic reduction is beautiful. And I was absolutely blown away by what is left behind, which is the most beautiful, fertile, and non-odorous soil I have ever experienced in my life. So it's pretty awesome what we're producing. Our facility is 11,500 square feet. It's located in Auburn. Right now, we have the plans to have 72 vessels available to not only the families of Washington State, but families from outside of the state. And the plan is for us to start in late April, receiving families and loved ones into our care. For my part, and as the services director, it's very important for me to communicate with the funeral homes. And I've always been a real proponent of transparency with people. Before Return Home in my professional life, I just like being really honest and open. And that's what I want people to know from me, is that I'm willing to be a resource. Terramation is a new form of disposition. And at the end of the day, we will be experts in answering questions. And if you as a funeral home are receiving questions from your families, our goal is to help you keep those relationships strong by being very knowledgeable on the subject, because at the end of the day, they may not ask, but if they do, we want you to be prepared. Because of our 72 vessel capacity, we do anticipate working with you. So that's going to be a cohesive relationship, because we'll be serving families that you've served, and we want to do the best job that we can for them. Our pricing is pretty straightforward. We're a base rate kind of situation, so everything just runs the same, and it makes everything really easy for you as a director to communicate those things with your family. And again, my contact information will be at the end, but really I'm jumping in here to let you know that I'm a member of the funeral industry. It's what I do, and serving families is what means the most to me, and it's what gives me a path in life. And so we want to work with you to introduce this and be educated. And so if at any point you have questions, that's what Return Home is really here to answer as many questions as you have. And here's our contact information. So thanks so much for having me, guys.
And that's the story, guys. Thank you all very much for listening to us.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, all of you, Katrina, Walt, Micah, Bree. Thank you for coming on and talking. We originally talked when we put this together of giving you each 15 to 20 minutes to talk, but every one of us got through this in less than 10. So I guess that worked out well. At this point, we are going to go into a question and answer period, and we have quite a number of questions that have been previously sent in. And so I'd like to go through those with you. Let me pull those up here real quick. We're going to ask these questions to our presenters, and in no random order, but we're just going to go through these questions one by one and see what your answers are. So the first question that comes up is, well, it kind of talked about in the process. Describe how you handle the bones and the teeth at the end of the process. How does that work out? Micah, can you answer that question? Oh, you got muted. There you go.
Sorry, my computer's dinging and I'm trying to mute to hide my ding, and I'm
Gotcha.
old and I can't figure out how to unding. Straight up, we have a machine that reduces bone into 1/8 inch fragments. We do it exactly 1 month after we begin the terramation process. We ensure that the body is completely gone when we go ahead and do that bone reduction. We filter out soil completely. We have the bone and teeth there. We reduce, or I should say, remove all inorganics, and then we begin the reduction process. So exactly 1 month in, and that's us.
Okay. Walt, how about you? What's going on up at Herland Forest? How do you guys handle bones and teeth?
Well, we've been bones are a crucial part of the composting process that we've been using. And so we basically use traditionally a dedicated hammer mill. So that's a kind of a country version of a cremulator. And so that's how we process those. The major concern is the dental issues. That's where we're most concerned about, removing any kind of mercury from the remains. And because unfortunately, if the mercury is exposed to the bacteria that we're using, because we're using bacteria, protozoa, and fungi, and if the mercury is there, it will be converted to methyl mercury, which is the most environmentally problematic form of mercury. So we're just obsessive about getting the mercury out before it gets exposed to the biological process any more than necessary. So basically a hammer mill.
Katrina, can you go into that question a little bit too? That seems to be a one that that has come up quite a bit. So can you please talk about that?
Yeah, Bree nailed the other one. It's bones and teeth, and then it's odor. Those are the questions. We could just go there and then we'd be done.
There you go.
We have a similar process in that we have a month of the body. We have about a week and a half of the body lying still in the vessel. We designed it that way because it felt right to have that body lie still. It's covered in plant material and a very specific recipe and moisture content that we've been refining over the years. And the reason the recipe is important is because it really, the happier those microbes are, the faster things break down. So we find the flesh is gone in around a week of that still time inside the vessel. We then do, as I said earlier, a couple of slow rotations during those last few weeks inside the vessel, which helps break up the skeleton and starts to break down the bone itself. And then between the vessel time and curing time, we do a processing of any bone fragments that remain down to about 1/8 of an inch. And then back to curing bin, we see a breakdown of that bone. So what you get back, though we let families know that they could see a small bone fragment, we haven't had it happen. So it's something we want to let people know could happen, but it's very rare that that's an occurrence.
Good. So as we all know, we've been experiencing the world of COVID-19. And that's a question that's come up many times. What about deceased with contagious diseases? And the example here being Ebola, COVID-19, CJD. Is there a disease that is something that cannot be composted? Is there any specifics there, or can anybody undergo this process? Walt, how about you? Let's get your input.
Well, there are a couple of basically the human version of mad cow disease, for example. There are a couple that this disposition is not allowed at all. But we've had issues with, for example, MARS, multiple antibiotic resistant streptococcus, and those kind of things are much more of a concern for us than actually COVID. And so there, it's a matter of personal protection. We want to make sure our staff are safe. We are certified by the Green Burial Council, and we consult with them on these cases. And in one case, they even authorized us to go ahead and inter within a sealed body bag. And so that's not what we want to do in our green funeral practice, but the safety of our people is paramount for us. So we consult and we do what we're told to do by the people who have the most knowledge.
Okay. Next question. This one goes to more of a business question. Will your services be available on a wholesale basis for funeral homes? Will you develop a relationship with licensed funeral homes to provide this service? Katrina, can you answer that one for us?
Yeah, right now we don't have a wholesale price for funeral homes. We do work with lots of funeral homes, or several, to do transportation of families if they come from out of the region, but Recompose is a full service. And we take families all the way from, transportation of the body through a service and beyond into the transformation itself.
Okay. Micah, how about you? Do you guys have a service that's available on a wholesale basis to funeral homes?
Sure do. We'd like, if I could have Bree answer that.
Okay, yeah, sure. So for our pricing, we decided to create a price that would work for both the partners that we'll be working with in the funeral industry and our families. It's $4,450. We are still a full service funeral home, but if you want to maintain those relationships, file the permits and work with the families, then we would be happy to work with you afterward to just make sure that they have a positive experience at our facility, and keep you informed, of course, along the way with where we are in the process. So.
Walt, same question.
Yeah, we are not a licensed funeral establishment. We're a licensed cemetery. So there are a couple of things that we are not allowed to do, having to do with preparing the body, the final stage of preparing the body for reduction. And so we form relationships with the funeral directors who are involved. And there's a portion of our reduction cost that is set aside for the participating funeral director. And then there's also the matter of the transportation can be done. We can arrange to have all that stuff done if that's desired, but our preference is to have the funeral director who's referring the family to us come and be participant and be involved in that. So there is kind of a discount there, but we've spoken in detail with the cemetery board on this, and they tell us that we are not allowed to offer a wholesale discount.
Okay. What type of container is used to return the 1 cubic yard of nutrient-rich soil to families, and how much does that typically weigh? Micah.
Oh, Rob. Okay, so this was a really hard bunch of decisions that we had to make. Now, one caveat, right? Katrina and Walt are doing business and we're not. So let's just put that on the table. But after a lot of thought, our decision is that the family does need to pick up the entire amount themselves if they want all of it. And the reason that we chose that was because we became deeply concerned that we wouldn't meet family expectations were we to deliver it. No one in the world has any understanding, well, I'm sorry, some people do, but not many, the raw quantity of what we're dealing with. We're talking about, like, as Katrina and Walt were saying, it fills a bed of an F-150 pickup truck. And so can you imagine if we deliver this to the family and grandma says, could you just put it down the narrow garden path in the back, right? And we go, no, we can't. And she's heartbroken, and she should be, right? So our decision has been, if they want a smaller amount, we will get it to them, and it will be in a really attractive and ecologically, conscious container. But if it's the whole amount, they are going to need to come to our facility and pick it up. Oh, you have to unmute Walt, I think.
Walt, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, we use open top 55-gallon drums. And,
Okay.
and another thing is that we commit to hold the material for up to a year so that people can receive it at a time of the year that is appropriate for them to get full use out of it. If I bring 4 55-gallon drums to somebody's driveway in January, it's not going to be very helpful to them. So we have a 126-acre forest, and we've got plenty of room. So we just tell them up front that any time in a year, they're welcome to come and get as much of it as they want. 1 drum, 2 drums, 3 drums, if they want us to package a small amount, happy to do that. Whatever they want. And the rest will go in our forest and be the foundation of what we call a strategic tree. For example, we recently did a burial where the woman wanted a hazelnut. Well, hazelnuts need pollinators. So we go ahead and create what we call a tree grave. So there's not actually a body in there, but it's a tree that will then support the other trees in the permaculture forest. So whatever way they want, one or the other, we can satisfy their needs.
This next question that comes in actually isn't really a question. It just says, I'm curious about pacemakers and radioactive implants. Pacemakers, radioactive implants, how were they dealt with? Katrina.
Well, pacemakers are taken out by Recompose beforehand. It has to be a licensed embalmer, I think, now in Washington to take out those pacemakers. And then radioactive seeds, oh gosh, I'm gonna botch the regs right now, but I think it's 30, they have to have been taken out 30 days prior to be allowed to be part of the NOR process. So that goes on the list of, if you have one now, or if you have one when you die, we're gonna have to wait 30 days in order to take your body into our care.
And Walt, I'm going to ask you the same question. You mentioned that you're not a funeral provider or a funeral home, but rather a cemetery. So when somebody comes to you, how are you handling the pacemakers removals? Is that before the process begins or after?
Again, we work closely with the funeral director embalmer, who is our connection to the family. And we just did one out of Bremerton, where they went through and removed all of the problematic components prior to transferring the remains into our care. And so that's that partnership with the funeral director. And like I said, there's part of our pricing structure that is there to compensate for the time that the funeral director is putting into the process.
Okay. And I'm going to keep you unmuted. I'll ask you the next question. Actually, this might be a good question for everybody. So we'll do it one at a time. I've heard, this is a question that came in. I heard talk that there is something about a grinding auger within the machine in which the remains pass through to grind them into smaller pieces. Can you speak to this? Do you have anything like that in your machine?
Not at all. It's you could see the picture before, and there's nothing in there other than just the wood chips and a thermometer.
Okay. Micah, I'm going to unmute you. Can you respond to the same question?
We do grind bone, but what we do, and we do use a grinder for it, it's sort of the terramation equivalent of a cremulator. But what we do is, and again, I'd said this is a very process-oriented thing. we only do it when the body is gone. And I don't just mean figuratively. I mean when the soil has been filtered out and the bones are sitting there alone. It is very analogous to cremation. So yes, we grind, but we do it a month into the process after we've separated all soil out. Very analogous to cremation.
So just kind of going along with that, do you then remove the soil and the remains to sift, or how do you separate that?
That's exactly right. So we have a separation process in which we take the vessel, we sort through, and we get all the soil, and that's the unders. The overs are the bones. We remove all inorganics. We reduce that bone into small shards, 1/8 of an inch, as Katrina was saying. Reintroduce that bone into the soil, let it sit for a month, and we are done.
Katrina, I'm going to ask you to unmute as well, and if you could answer the same question for us.
Yeah, similarly, we any blending of bone happens when the body has already broken down, and what's left are pieces of skeleton, and no flesh remains. It's again really kind of incredible how quickly that flesh breaks down. I'm always astounded. We had an auger of sorts in one of our previous designs, one of our early prototypes, but it didn't do what we hoped it would. At this point, we use 2 types of mixers that break down those bones, again, to about 1/8 of an inch. And yeah, I mean, it is interesting to communicate with families. I think typically when ashes are given back from cremation, I'm not sure actually, you could raise your hand if it's said that is bone fragment or not. But as a new process that's gotten so much interest and curiosity, we are now starting again to tell families, you could see a small piece of bone in that soil at the end, because we know that there's again more curiosity and interest and a need for us to be extremely straightforward with what's going back to families.
Okay. All right. Talking about the bone, somebody wrote in, actually gave the citation for the WAC, which is the Washington Code from the Health Code. And it talked about testing being done on each individual for the first 20 individuals, I think it is. What is your testing process? How does that testing work and what are you testing for? What's happening during that testing? What is it you're looking for? Micah, can you unmute and talk to that?
We sort of divide it into 2 camps. You have your little bits that are compostable that can cause us issues. The primary driver there being fecal coliform, which is something that they measure and that we have to provide when we are doing our testing. So that's sort of on the composting side. And then on your, in the soil that people are concerned about, you have your heavy metals and these sorts of things. So it really goes one side or the other. When it comes to fecal coliform, you're going to have high rates if you are not completely composting your material. The solution to that is to make sure you use the necessary time. Nature will take care of that. Heavy metals are heavy metals. In many ways, we are captive to what we are given. I cannot remove things that are already in the body and in the soil. So to that, I can't answer. We have already been testing and we have been meeting the thresholds, but we have to see what happens over time. I'm curious to hear Katrina and Walt, because I know that they are putting us through a very stringent testing protocol.
Yeah, I would be curious as well, and we'll open them up too. I just was looking up that code, and it does talk quite a bit about all sorts of things with this testing, that less than 0.01 milligrams of dry weight of physical contaminants, which include things but not limited to intact bone, dental fillings, and medical implants. But it also goes into some, you talked about the arsenic and the cadmium and the lead, mercury, selenium, and the parts per million that you have to be below that. I guess the question that I would have is, what happens when you send these tests off, and where do you send them? Where do you send these tests? Who's responsible for that testing? What happens when they come back and the tests are positive for these things? What do you have a contingency plan in place of what you're going to do at that point? Walt, can you answer that question?
we're doing this outside in the forest. And we've just 2 weeks ago, we were having low temperatures of 15 degrees overnight. So our process is slow at this point. And so we haven't sent anything off for, we just started our first process in late December. And so we have not sent off anything for testing at this point. We are in the process of installing a supplemental heater to deal with the cold temperatures at night that deals with circulating hot water in tubing inside the cradle. And so that's how we're raising and ensuring that that process is there. So like I said, we're not to the point yet where we've sorted that out. We are trying to partnership with a local commercial composting facility and to kind of piggyback on their techniques and their procedures. Firm believer in, going to the people doing the work and letting them tell us and teach us how to do it.
So with this being a brand new process, though, again, coming back, what's going to happen? Maybe Katrina, you might be able to respond to this. What happens if it comes back and you are over that threshold of either contaminants, heavy metals, or what's the word they used? Physical contaminants such as bone, dental fillings, and medical implants. How do you readdress that process?
Well, we pushed back a bit on the regulations around the heavy metals because our soil scientist, Dr. Carpenter Bog, was saying that's not a necessary or reasonable test. We didn't win when we pushed back, doesn't always work, but we thought that was not necessary. Now we keep passing that test, so it's not as much that there's a concern of such heavy metal levels in the soil that we're creating, but that it's an additional expense for us, and it's sort of an additional unnecessary, we think, test. When we did the pilot program back in 2018 at Washington State University, we passed mercury tests even with fillings for all of our 6 participants. We did a lot of testing back then to make sure that the soil was safe for human use, for touching and holding and breathing. And don't eat it, but you could if you really wanted to, and also for the environment. In terms of the pathogens, that's really critical for us, and we take it really seriously. We have an in-house test set up for fecal coliform so that we can do our tests along the way and keep tweaking that recipe, so we really know that we have the process that's going to pass that fecal coliform test every time. And then we have to send it out to third-party testing. That's part of the regulation. So we use luckily there's plenty of third-party compost testers that, because livestock have been composted for so long and the regulations are piggybacked on those guidelines, there are testers that you send that soil to, and they send back a test whether you've passed or failed. In the event that we failed, that we had high fecal coliform levels, we would just continue to process. So we wouldn't ever give back to a family until we've seen the pass. But again, we have in-house testing at Recompose, so we're constantly monitoring and we're refining that process as we go. With people becoming larger and larger in our society, is there a weight limit on this process? Is there a capacity limit as far as what each vessel may be able to hold? Or do you have oversized vessels that are available? Micah, can you answer that question?
Yeah, Bree was talking to me about this a lot in the as she was coming on board. We're not perfect, but we've got our height limit is about a 6'5", and we can get pretty darn close to 300 pounds at this point. So that's where we feel pretty comfortable. We might be able to go larger than that, but our sample size and the research that we've done has not exceeded those sizes. But that's basically where we are.
Yeah, you got to get bigger than that. I'm 6'5" and 300 pounds, so you got to do something else.
We're not in any hurry for you, Rob. You take your time and eat more rutabaga.
There you go. Yeah, right. Walt, how about you? What do you got going there with size restrictions?
Well, again, we manufacture our own vessels in-house, and so we are planning on basically the working diameter on the ones we're building now are 3 feet. And we have in plan one that will be 4 feet. And as soon as we have a client of size needing that, we'll go ahead and shift up for that. But we're doing our primary production on ones that are designed for people 200 pounds and under.
Okay. Katrina, what's going on at Recompose? Do they have an opportunity for larger vessels, or are they all standard size as well?
We have a standard size that can hold up to, I'm pretty sure the number is 350. And then we're currently in the manufacturing process for an additional larger vessel. We don't want to have to turn anyone away. It does take more plant material to do a larger body. So there is an upper limit per volume for what size you can comfortably handle. Not by comfortably, I mean sort of reasonably, actually. But yeah, we're designing and having manufactured a larger vessel that will sit, next to the others. Same idea though.
And while we're talking, I'll keep you on here for this next question. Do you see NOR becoming an opportunity for disposition in the future at firms other than or that offer other multiple methods of disposition, or do you see it staying as a specialized option specific to your facilities?
I got ahead of you and muted myself too soon.
Sorry.
My bad. I think it could go, I certainly think it could be a company offering a range of services. I could see natural organic reduction easily alongside alkaline hydrolysis and natural burial, say, for the folks who are looking at the kind of menu of green options. And I think our clients are coming to us. They probably would have otherwise chosen cremation, most of them, just because that was what was most easily available. And they're choosing our process and they're really excited about it. Yeah, so I think I could see a company also offering all three of conventional burial, cremation, and natural organic reduction. No reason why not.
Micah, how about you? Where are you at with that, do you think? I know you guys are just getting started, but
we are. I don't see it so much as a business proposition. It's great. Put it all under one roof. And I see that. And I see that as possible. But the thing that at least we're seeing on our side is to do terramation on scale. It kind of reminds me, I always end up with food analogies, which is super inappropriate, but here we are. To make one coffee cake, right? Me and Bree make a coffee cake and it works out great. So we decide we're going to make 10,000. That is a completely different scale. And so if we're doing terramation on scale, it requires technology and infrastructure that's really extensive. So it's going to have to be a very special kind of company that can put that variety of technology under one roof and adequately maintain it, use it, market it, run it. I do think in the next while, especially for terramation, that we are going to see pure play companies. They are going to be really scaled. And they're going to be doing that and that alone. Just because doing this well is pretty hard. It's pretty hard. So there's mine.
So this is a question that I'm going to ask all three of you. It's kind of an opinion question, I guess you could say. The public are increasingly eco-conscious and want to choose funerary services that will allow their remains to return to the earth quickly with minimal hazardous chemicals and minimal carbon footprint. How does the energy use or the space requirements, the time requirements, et cetera, of composting compare to that of cremation or green burial? Micah, can you go into that?
I thought you were going to give it to Katrina. She'd handle it so well. Cremation specifically, right? We're talking about 30 gallons of fuel that we use. We incinerate a body. We blow everything into the atmosphere as greenhouse gas that could ever otherwise go to the earth. So that's a hard one to compete against. Natural organic reduction, terramation. Our primary ingredient is water, oxygen, and plant matter. So I don't think we're going to see much difficulty on that side. But I'd actually like to make a small twist, you guys, and talk about something slightly different. It's been my privilege to talk to the funeral industry, which is not something I'd done until 2 years ago. And in talking to you guys, so many of you, it's been really interesting. we have soil on our table. And at the end of our meetings, I go, sniff this. This is the greatest stuff ever. And I would say about half the folks over 40 in the funeral business that have been morticians say to me, I'm sorry, I can't smell it. And the reason is, and everyone knows, is because the chemicals that we in the funeral industry have used have hurt our sense of smell. And it doesn't just hurt our sense of smell, it affects our sense of taste. And as I researched it, the funeral industry, people die younger. And so in a lot of ways too, I think we have to start looking in a holistic way at this, not just, oh yeah, natural organic reduction, terramation, it's less polluting. It's true, but it's also going to be something that we as an industry can work with and stay healthy. And I think the funeral industry, amazing soldiers, dedicated, kind, focused, but to their detriment. The things that we work with as an industry hurt us. And it's really important we start using materials that don't. And terramation, natural organic reduction is the start of this. And that's so exciting to me. And I look forward to having it widely adopted. We'll live better.
Katrina, same question, and I can repeat it if
Okay, I was going to ask. I lost track of the question.
The public are increasingly eco-conscious and want to choose funerary services that will allow their remains to return to the earth quickly with minimal hazardous chemicals and minimal carbon footprint. How does the energy use, the space requirements, and the time requirements of composting compare to cremation, alkaline hydrolysis, or green burial?
Or green burial. Interesting. We had a life cycle assessment run by a life cycle assessment PhD, those exist. And he found that we're saving a metric ton of carbon per person who chooses natural organic reduction over cremation or conventional burial. I'll speak to natural burial for a second. First of all, just to say that I love that concept. I love the idea of being buried in the earth just directly. And yet I never want to live rurally again. I like living in cities. And so, this to me is the urban equivalent of natural burial. From a carbon footprint standpoint, natural burial, there's so many different ways to make a natural burial site. Some of them are mown. Some of them are complete conservation land. Some of them are somewhere in between. There's hybrids. So it was harder for the life cycle assessment people to get a bead on what natural burial carbon footprint is because they're so different. Carbon, a metric ton of carbon saved. If you like carbon, that's a pretty big number. If you don't care about carbon, I think for a lot of people, it's just turning into soil versus flame cremation or versus being buried at all. Some people don't like the idea of being buried in the ground. We also have a really great kind of like, if there's a niche option for those folks, and I don't know what the percentages of people that are afraid that they'll be buried or cremated alive. It's probably very small, but for those people, it is a very terrifying idea. And we like to say that if you get into a Recompose vessel, you're surrounded by nice warm plant material, you can just knock on the door and we'll let you back out. You have a whole month to wake up and we'll let you out again. So we have that niche customer base as well. But just finally, in terms of the space needs in the time in comparison to cremation, I think that's the Achilles heel of natural organic reduction. It takes a whole month inside that vessel where it, takes 3 hours to burn a body. And so we can't really ever have the same small physical footprint as a crematory retort. It just would never work. So I'd say that's a challenge for sure. It's like how to have enough vessels to serve enough people.
Okay. Walt, do you want to respond to that one or you want to go to a next one?
No, sure. Again, we're 126 acres, so we're in a situation where we have no limitations on space for how large our operation grows. On the other hand, we're a nonprofit, and we don't have the incentive of having to bring out funding for investors or anyone else. And so we take the position that a person's going to be dead for a long time. And there's really no point from our standpoint of doing this out of cycle. We tell people that we don't work on the time clock, we work on the calendar. And so working with that slow process, letting it go naturally, is our approach to it. And so if someone wants to go back to the forest, then our facility, I think, is ideal for them because they can actually come to the forest and stay there. They don't have to go off. And the carbon dioxide that is produced in our process is plant food. And in the forest, and the trees are very happy to get it. So we feel our primary concern is to ensure that very little of the flesh in a decedent is converted to methane, because there is the problem with just straight burial. Much of the body will turn to methane, and methane is a much worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. So a number of in our enhanced natural burial, we have ways to get oxygen down into the organisms that are doing the decomposition and so on. So that's part of our focus, is not just the carbon footprint, it's making sure that the carbon's not methane.
Okay. With the length of time that this process takes, what do you have in place for housing or holding remains that are waiting for this process? And is there a time frame that you cannot, if decomposition takes place or is an advanced stage, can you still start the process? So I guess you got a 2-question part there. Do you have a storage facility, and what's the length of time after decomposition takes place that you can start your process? Walt?
I'm not sure I follow you. We have our own walk-in cooler, and we have backup big overgrown chest freezers. In case we have a failure with our walk-in cooler, we have a backup resource so that we can deal with that.
Gotcha. And your science.
Oh, go ahead. For a lot of our winter, our problem would be keeping the body from freezing. We don't want to lose the internal bacteria. Katrina talked about how the bacteria is there. It's a great degree. Now, we augment it with inoculants developed by a major composting company out of British Columbia. So we want to hit it with not just the body's natural bacteria, but also protozoa and fungi to help give a broad preparation to the soil. Because even if there's material there that doesn't catch the eye, the trees need things reduced down to the atomic level. What the trees need is things like magnesium and phosphorus and potassium. And those things have to be broken down by detrivores to the point of they're atomically available so the fungi can get them back to the trees. And so we're saying, okay, we encourage people to say, look, let this run 6 months or so. The other factor is we have a 40-acre campground adjacent to our facility, and we encourage people to do memorial gatherings and celebration facilities. So there's an ongoing relationship with the families that are choosing our facility.
Okay. Katrina, I'm assuming you have some sort of holding facility.
We have a policy that we don't want to hold anyone right now past a month. Just not, the reality is we don't have quite enough capacity to meet demand. So it's a rolling capacity, as you can kind of imagine. We lay someone in, and then about a month later, that vessel will be available again. It's a lot like a small hotel room or a hotel for the dead with 10 rooms. And so we are doing a lot of communicating with families that really want this process, talking to them about why, we might have a vessel open in a month. That's great. We can bring you in and store you in refrigerated storage. There's nothing technically wrong about storing a body for quite some time, but storing a body doesn't solve the fact that we only have 10 units right now.
Okay. And with the advanced decomposition, do the microbes that you're needing for this process, do they go away through the advancement of decomposition, hindering the opportunity for composting to take place, or does that have a factor in this process? Micah?
I mean, it's not something we've explored a lot. At first blush, it doesn't concern me overly. That would probably be for John Paul, my soil scientist team. But at first look at it, nah, I don't see an issue there.
Repositioning. you've all talked about kind of rotating of these vessels. Is there a time where you have to reposition, or do you have some sort of process in the vessel that will stir the bulking agents that are inside? Micah, can you speak to that?
We made an important decision, and you guys can come visit our facility and take a look at it, to make our vessels just that, vessels. In the back of our facility, we have all the machinery that does the rest of the work. And so what that means is the body just sits and doesn't do anything while it's in the vessel, in what we call front of house. Front of house is wide open, and you're welcome to come see it. When we want to mix the material, we take the vessel, move it to back of house, and we have a rotator. And that rotator holds, it's custom made, and it holds the vessel and just gently and slowly turns it. And at the same time, we are adding water usually. So we want to hydrate and we want to rotate. And that's just the way we do it. And then when we're done, it takes 10, 15 minutes, back the vessel goes to front of house where it is publicly accessible. And that's the way we do it.
Anything inside the vessel rotating as well to stir, or is that just the external?
All we need to do is gentle rotation. There really isn't much. And in that first month that the body is in the vessel, we don't touch the body at all. We don't do anything with it. It doesn't need it. The microbes are going, it's doing what it's doing. You've got the plant matter around it. There really is no need to hurry that process. It's going to be just fine on its own without any agitation.
How is that process done at Recompose, Katrina? Do you have anything inside the vessel that's rotating to mix or stir, or is it just the outer part of the vessel that's rotating?
Yeah, we do have an insertable mixer that we use some of the time. We're at about week 3, again, when everything is broken down and what's left are large bone fragments, we do some in-vessel mixing. We find it does a really beautiful job of reintroducing oxygen or helping to make sure that aeration is thorough and is really reaching all of that material, and also to make sure that everything is just blending into this really lovely kind of topsoil material. And then our vessels do rotate as well, which helps do essentially the same thing. It's about aeration always, and making sure those microbes are happy, and making sure all the food in there, which is both body and plant material, is getting broken down.
So at week 3 then, is the soft tissues, those have all dissolved or gone, and what's left is the bone that this is stirring?
Typically,
is that right?
Typically week 3, we've got the skeleton has not only fallen apart because I'm like going into a little more detail than I would normally, but this is a bunch of funeral directors. The soft tissue is broken down typically in about 5 days for us. Then as we slowly rotate, we see the skeleton falls apart. And then because we're using such a refined recipe and moisture content in there, and our temperatures are so hot, we're seeing bone degradation, so that you might have a 3-inch bone fragment when we're mixing at week 3, but we don't have a full skeleton.
Gotcha. We've got just about 10 minutes left on our time. I wanted to get to some of the questions that have appeared and been sent to me through the chat. And so here's one here. Do each of you have authorization forms available for us? I'm assuming that's the people on the call in the funeral profession, to review and educate our staff ahead of time of need. Do you have some sort of specialized authorization form that we would use? I think, Katrina, you're unmuted at this point, so we'll start with you.
Sure. All our forms are on our website. Please come over to recompose.life. That's LIFE. And we've got lots of information, especially if you go to the, there's an articles section, which we just have oodles of information about how you might access NOR, help a family from somewhere else, access the forms, etc. It's all there.
Good. Walt, what's going on at Herland Forest? Do you have specialty forms?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's very important that people have an idea of what to expect. Dealing with anxiety in a situation where people don't quite know what to do. We're trying to do everything we can to comfort it. So if you go to our website, on the top menu, on the far right, it says natural organic reduction. And if you go there, the bottom of the page has our authorization form, because we want people to understand what's happening and have realistic expectations.
Okay. Micah, what's going on at Return Home? What do you have forms that you send out or make available?
We are mid-process, but yeah, it's an absolute necessity. We're not done yet, but we're going to be done in short order, and they're being drafted. So for us, it's an absolute, and you'll see them soon. Okay.
I've had the same question come up quite a number of times, and so I'm going to ask it. And this is exactly word for word, what are the workhorse microorganisms? What are the microorganisms that create this process? Micah.
Well, I mean, really, we're talking about microbes here. These are the things that exist in our body that we simply put on hyperdrive. They work to digest our food, and they work to transform our bodies into new material. They respond well to moisture and heat, and we surround them with lovely nutrients, and they're off to the races. So really, it's microbial, and that's really where we're at. So pretty straight up in that regard. You're going to see Walt absolutely dive deep. So watch this.
Walt, go ahead and come on and talk with us.
Yeah, we have an indigenous fungal network in our forest, because half of the biomass in a forest is underground in the microbiota. So part of our operation is because most people don't have a lot of fungus in them. And yet we're trying to integrate between the body and the wood chips. And so we carefully inoculate with fungal resources to help because the spores on the outside of the woody biomass that we chip up for our soil have spores in them, and we want to encourage them and help them get the cellulosic components of the wood mass broken down. So we do not use alfalfa in the sense that our sheep and our goats would be very upset with me if I was transferring their food into the cradle when it's not necessary with our pasture, because we're inoculating with fungals.
Okay. This is a two-part question. Can you use this process with an embalmed body? And does your facilities have offer viewing ahead of time? So do you have an opportunity for people to view the remains, or can they be embalmed? Walt.
Well, again, our focus is on a natural burial and green burial council, etc. So we are just, we've never dealt with an embalmed body, and I would have no idea what to do with it.
Okay. Katrina, can you accept embalmed remains?
No, I'd go even further to say we're working hard to make decomposition happen as fast as we can. So it doesn't work to have an embalmed body in this process, and they're trying to do opposite things.
Sure. And I'm thinking Micah's still on here, but I lost him on here. Micah, if you're on here, I'm going to ask you to unmute. I don't see you on my screen anymore.
I'm here. My internet died, and I'm here with my phone hotspot. Don't ask. I don't know.
Embalmed bodies, we understand. What about viewing? You have viewing facilities, or are you going to have viewing facilities?
We're super excited about that. I mean, answer just like them. No embalming, can't do it. Absolute non-starter. In terms of a viewing facility, we're extremely excited, and Bree is working as well on getting a place where we can do laying in ceremonies in our facility where families can come. COVID obviously stops that in its tracks now, but I think Katrina's done a brilliant job on the video side, and I look forward to taking that one step further, as I'm sure the rest are, for getting family to come in as well. So yeah, we'd love to do those ceremonies, those laying in ceremonies when we can.
We've had a couple questions that came in with regards to odors and how are odors managed. Katrina, why don't we start with you? How are odors managed at Recompose?
Yeah, well, the first thing to know is if you've ever composted, a well-working compost pile smells pretty good. It smells like soil when it's working well. And the working is essentially having plenty of aeration, so the microbes never get anaerobic. They're always working with plenty of oxygen. So that's where we start. it's fairly simple, and anyone who's composted would know about that. But then we also had to get a permit from the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, which is, I think it's like certainly one of the most stringent air agencies in the country in terms of their rules and regulations and the way they permit projects. So we have an aeration system that's constantly pulling sort of negative aeration for each vessel, gets aerated, and then that air gets filtered. And so that's how we ensure that if there were a negative odor, it's not leaving the building. But I'm really been extremely pleased with the odor both in the building and in the vessels, and certainly that soil smells great when it comes out and it's finished.
Micah, if you're on, address that a little bit as well, please.
I mean, yes, compost, if it's aerobic and it's going well, the odor isn't too bad, but it can get funky. That's for certain, sure. And we are dealing with dead bodies, and that's just what we're dealing with. So I'm not going to call the odor great, but manageable. On our side, we've had to create an HVAC system that is as large as anything I've ever encountered. We run it through our facility. We call it Octopus. It goes into every vessel. It then goes through our facility from south to north with increasing air exchanges as we go up. It finally exits the building and goes through a very large scale biofilter that has been created by my team with this really cool organic slime in it that is magic. I'm not going to go farther because I don't always understand it. But when the air is running through it and comes out, it's clean. And that organic material lasts for a 5-year period. So it's pretty darn neat. And if you want to come check it out, give us a call.
Right. We have 2 minutes left on our clock here, or actually 3 minutes. So I'm going to ask each one of you, starting with Walt, please tell us how we get a hold of you, number one. And once COVID opens up a little bit more, or the restrictions open up, is your facility available for a tour to take a look at?
Yeah, we're available right now. We have been, and we do tours through the both the facility and through the enhanced natural burial area, etc. And we're happy to talk about many of the systems going on here. I would ask that if anyone knows anyone who would like to consider an internship, we've been doing internships for 14 years. And so if somebody's interested in exploring the intersection of death care and intentional community, we would invite them to check out our websites and talk with us.
Thank you, Walt. Katrina, same question. How do we get in touch with you, and will your facility be open that we can take tour of?
Yeah, in terms of the tours, we're still thinking about it in terms of COVID safety. That's pretty critical for our staff. In terms of getting in touch, we've got a website. Again, it's got kind of a depth of information on it. So check out www.recompose.life. And if you have questions that aren't answered there, or you just want to talk, have some industry questions, or as a funeral director have some questions about talking with families, feel free to email us at info@recompose.life.
Perfect. Micah, same question. Facilities open. How do we get a hold of you, and can we tour?
Our facility is open. You can tour. Bree's email is bsmith@returnhome. I'm the CEO, Micah Truman, mtruman@returnhome. Give us a call, 206-888-HOME. Visit us. We're passionate about believing in transparency. And the more that you guys can see, the more that you believe that we can be your partner. So that's really important to us. And please do reach out. We're here.
Well, thank you, Walt, Katrina, Micah. This has been fun. It is 7 o'clock. We promised to end at 7. I know there's still a lot more questions. And so I would encourage you, if you do have questions that haven't been answered, to email either Walt or Katrina or Micah, and I'm sure they would be happy to answer those for you. As I said at the beginning, this is going to be next week's podcast and member talks. And so I would encourage each of you to go on to YouTube and subscribe, check us out. We've done well over 100 of these now. with different folks around the country, and we'd love to have you watch them and check them out. Like us on Facebook and all that stuff. You can find us everywhere. I want to thank United Heritage for sponsoring tonight's program. They've done a great job, and we love having them as not only our sponsors for this particular episode, but as well as members of the WSFDA. And I want to thank our board of directors as well for allowing us to put these programs on. They're a dedicated group of volunteers that have just embraced the idea of the podcast and love to have the information shared. And so I want to thank them and thank all of you for coming on and being a part of this. So until next time, everybody, thanks for checking it out. And starting on Tuesday, you'll be able to listen to the recording on the podcast. Bye, everybody.